Art has the ability to connect people to diverse experiences of the world. Textile art, in particular, is a powerful medium for documenting and interpreting political and social realities. The following presentation will discuss two historically distinct examples of textile art and will provide interesting pathways for thinking about their cultures of origin. Afghan war rugs and the Bayeux tapestry are handmade objects that provide a glimpse into how art can function to make sense out of a chaotic world.
The Bayeux tapestry and the genre of carpet known as Afghan war rugs are works that depict violence between societies, functioning as nuanced documents of life during and after conflict, whose meaning varies from audience to audience. The Bayeux tapestry is 230 feet long and 20 inches tall, like a giant comic strip. It dates back to the 1070s. It was made in the aftermath of the epic Battle of Hastings, the conquest of England where William, the Duke of Normandy, took the throne from Harold. It was commissioned by a patron who remains unknown, but was certainly a noble person who would benefit from portraying the conflict in an egalitarian way. The war carpets, by contrast, are a relatively new genre of art. The first documented war rugs were made in the 1980s in response to Soviet conflict, and they continue to be produced and sold across Afghanistan today, usually to Westerners. This is an image of Chicken Street, the tourist district in Kabul, where they are sold, but they can also be found with a quick search on eBay. The Bayeux tapestry format is a hybrid of styles. Since it is rendered by embroidery, the threads create a distinct texture very different from that of woven tapestries. The contrast is in fact more reminiscent of a relief. We could compare it to the column of Trajan and other Roman carved friezes, which medieval Northern Europe would have been familiar with through travel. Similar works would have been hung in the halls of the Viking Age Scandinavia, like this one from the tomb of Queen Asa in Osberg, Norway. But the source for many embroidered images was precious woven silks from the Mediterranean and Near East, which the West had been importing for several hundred years and were coveted objects of desire in the Saxon court. The influence of these tapestries are mostly manifest in the border scenes, in which lead the specter's eye up, down, and diagonally, as well as left to right. The border scenes depict mythical or faraway animals like the lion, griffin, centaur, camel, ostrich, wolf, dragon, all head rolls as symbols of virtue or vice. The Afghan rugs are also a hybrid of Islamic and Western pictorial representation. Geometricity and hand-woven production are highly traditional, but these rugs incorporate far more figurative representation and depict the trajectory of weapons as they grow more sophisticated over time. The Bayeux tapestry, as I alluded to, is actually not a tapestry but an embroidery, wool sewn onto linen. Its creation was an endeavor that involved the entire community, including individuals of all classes. Peasants would grow flax and spin it into thread, then take it to a professional weaver who turned it into lengths of fabric. Next commenced a dyeing process so effective that the colors are still vibrant today. Finally, the tapestry was designed. Small drawings were usually produced on parchment first. This standardized format led to a cohesive style throughout, which followed artistic conventions while employing clever compositional strategies to lead the viewer's eye between key scenes. When it came to the embroidery process, a unified style was created by a group of 8 to 10 women who would have collaborated on the work, creating a style which, while full of quirks and idiosyncratic detail, remains uniform. Finally, the apparent lack of material value of the tapestry, cruder embroidery of wool on linen, is one of the reasons for its survival, according to scholar Carola Hicks. Looters would cut up textiles of silk. Furthermore, the craftsmanship and material meant that such items were status symbols as potent as jewelry or fine metalwork. And here is a close-up where you can see the stitching. Finally, how are these works similar? While these works are far removed from each other in space and time, the gap between them can be bridged by their thematic connections. Just as the newly formed Saxon and Norman communities came together to collaborate on the Bayeux tapestry, Afghan prayer rug makers are united by their use of traditional facture to say something urgent and pressing. Their portable textile formats, one singular and ancient, the other plural and contemporary, provide an innate mode for the message to be spread. Afghan rugs are sold to a worldwide audience, and as French court was highly mobile at the time, the tapestry would be brought from castle to castle across the country, reaching many eyes.
Another significant factor that leads to the essential differences between these two works is that the Bayeux tapestry was made for propaganda purposes, and the Afghan rugs were likely made as cultural and commercial art product. The image on the left shows the original hanging conditions of the Bayeux tapestry. This place was considered suitable for the display because it allows the viewers to see the whole tapestry in the eye level. Then, here we have a shot styling the Afghan war rugs. Still, were these rugs made for economic opportunism? Probably not. Not only because there are too many categories, but also because there are too many instances of separate insertions of individual narratives, according to the scholar Caroline Hicks. They can be understood both literally and metaphorically. The use of symbolism reflects a negotiation between traditions and current conditions. For example, Islamic art is famous for its cosmic abstract geometrics, and here we have one showing these geometric shapes. And the image on the right, you can see there's a tank and map. Since the late 1970s, the motif of the Afghanistan map has often used as a framing device to represent multiple political positions, contexts, and events. Different from the war rugs, there is a paradoxical nature in the Bayeux tapestry. Its presentation is ambiguous and superfluous. Some might say it is superfluous because there are text explanations next to the images. Also, there is a flow in a continuous narrative. There are many visual links. A character in one scene will point his finger towards the next. His body may be facing left, but his head or feet are already turning to the other way. In this way, these figures were also communicating with the viewers. On the other hand, one might also argue that it is ambiguous in some case. Image and text disagree with each other. Also, when we take a look at the border scenes, we can see some scenes came ultimately from classical literature, adding out this subversive anecdote from the Aesop fables. The tapestry also accommodates different ethnic classes and gender groups. For the ethnic groups, the figure hairs and fashion indicates their nationalities, and for the classes, the reference to fables also indicates that upper classes can feel more meanings, not to mention the word itself is a community effort. To accommodate more gender groups, one can find a woman's present in the scene. For example, Goritson, who is the widow of King Edward, sister of King Harold, and friend of King William, was present in the whole central narrative of the tapestry. The cross-cultural context it depicts is also a significant part. For example, besides the warfare and switch of the power, it depicts animals selling import to Western Christian road from an Eastern culture. Moreover, source for many images was precious woven silk from Eastern Mediterranean, inspired by import silks, Scandinavian art, maybe even column of Trajan.
So how do we access the plurality of experience in the world? Art has profound effects on how lived worlds emerge and are understood. Both the Bayeux tapestry and Afghan war rugs unmake and remake a known, authorized world. Both clearly concerned with historical consciousness and political process, the Bayeux tapestry and Afghan war rugs intervene in their relative worlds as propaganda. Through this process, they present new conceptual frameworks for interpreting historical events and offer new grounds for human connectivity. The tapestry can be viewed as a historical text that offers a carefully doctored account of recent history. The most common interpretation of the tapestry's narrative confirms William of Normandy's ascension to the throne in England as being the direct result of a victory over Harold's army in a legally justifiable campaign. However, the tapestry's viewers would also have appreciated that William's claim to kinship was based on his familial ties with King Harold's predecessor, Edward. Carola Hicks argues that the tapestry was in part created to put a positive gloss on a confused post-war situation by emphasizing William's entitlement at a time when the Norman grasp on England was still precarious. Furthermore, King Harold is the main character in the first half of the tapestry, which can be interpreted as a celebration of his heroic character. Interpreted in this manner, the tapestry provided a public resurrection of Harold's reputation, assuaging the still disaffected English. Although it is assumed that the work was created from the point of view of William and clearly justified his right to claim the throne from King Harold, an ambiguity in its reception was integral to the tapestry's function. We are left with some unanswered questions. Did the tapestry favor William or Harold? Was it made so the Normans could impress the subjugated foe, or so that the English could flatter the victors while still insulting them in secret? Although the tapestry presents a logical and progressive narrative that can be read from left to right, it seems that the content was rendered ambiguously so that the recently conquered Saxons and victorious Normans could access segments of the tapestry that were most useful for making sense of living in a newly configured social hierarchy. Afghan war carpets are also a visual mode for negotiating identity in the face of extreme uncertainty. Again, ambiguity in content is an issue here. Afghan war rugs, like the Bayeux tapestry, raise questions of intention. For which audience are the carpets made? Are they made for an external or internal one, or both? Both textiles have the capacity to be read as multivalent objects. In the Afghan war carpets, an emblem of a map may evoke a sense of identity, optimism, and the promise of social and historical continuity. An emblem of a tank or a bomb, on the other hand, may evoke fear and horrific moments. Unlike the Bayeux tapestry, each symbol consists within the same pictorial field of one carpet. The Bayeux tapestry allowed its viewers to make sense of their world by offering a drawn-out and extended visual narrative, from which separate portions could be interpreted in isolation from the rest of the tapestry, fulfilling and affirming one side of the conflict story over another. As a result, the French could ignore the interpretations of the English, or vice versa. Conversely, Afghan war rugs offer various representations of contemporary Afghanistan together in a tightly constricted visual field, which in effect offer multiple experiences of the world simultaneously.
As humans, we can only view life from our narrow slice of perspective, but that is what makes works like these so fascinating, for they constitute a synthesis of multiple perspectives while remaining fluid and open to interpretation. After viewing the presentation, we would like students to consider the following questions. How does the physical process of sitting down with a group of people to stitch and/or sew help communities establish a cohesive identity?
The second question is that we are bombarded by images every day. How do you think works like the Bayeux tapestry and the Afghan war works are similar or different to images like ads that also attempt to promote an interpretation of human experience?